so many people in general are getting their information, their health and wellness information from people who have zero training on TikTok and on Instagram, especially. And that's what it can be fueling a lot of these really disordered eating behaviors.
Hey, Mary.
Hey, Carla. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing a little better today. Finally got back on my morning routine, so
Oh,
feeling
good.
good. Yeah, I did some hot yoga this morning. Always sets me in a good mood.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
I had a new morning routine myself. I'm glad to hear you're feeling better, first off.
thank you.
Uh, yeah. So, based on your recommendations and being inspired by hearing your new weightlifting routine and the research coupled with the research I've been doing on the importance of lifting heavy when you're a woman in her 40s, heading into menopause, perimenopause, the importance of lifting heavy weights
Mhm.
for protection against bone loss and building muscle mass and retaining muscle mass that we lose as women so rapidly in our 40s. So all that's to say that I added lifting heavy weights to my morning routine a few days a week, and I've been doing creatine in my smoothies, which is a really important compound that is great for brain health and for women in their 40s and perimenopause and menopause. It's really excellent for cognition and for muscle growth and for endurance and energy. So I'm pretty excited about the addition of those two new things to my routine.
I love that. I'm so excited for you. Yeah, I don't know how much I got into it, but like I had mentioned to you, even just personally offline, it really did change my life. I feel like just because not only like did it change body composition for me, but just that freedom that comes with really not having to like worry so much about or obsess about food.
Exactly. Yeah. And we talked about this in an episode, just that women really benefit from lifting heavier weights. It does not bulk you up. And the importance also of getting protein. I'm finding that to be a challenge is getting my protein needs met. I'm trying to shoot for about 100 grams a day, but I am falling pretty short. And we talked about that in the episode, easy ways to get protein in and to increase protein. So I'm trying to take my own advice.
Yeah. Good. I know. It's definitely I feel like something you have to perfect and works for you, and sometimes that just takes a little bit of, tweaking your routine and finding creative ways to get it in. Like I'm obsessed with cottage cheese right now because there's so much you can do with it. It's
Oh,
it's like the new cauliflower. You know how
oh,
like
it
they did.
is. Those
Yeah.
whipped cauliflower, those whipped cottage cheese recipes I see online look amazing.
They're so good.
So if
They
you
are.
can handle dairy, Greek yogurt and cottage cheese are great sources of dairy protein.
Yeah, they really are, and they're really good quality sources of protein, especially for muscle growth.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so but speaking of, kind of obsession about food, it's perfect segue to what we're gonna talk about today. So Mary and I this is a topic that's pretty, like, near and dear to our hearts just because I feel like we both went through this, but we wanna discuss something called orthorexia. So, this is something typically that not just women, but I think it definitely affects women more so because we're typically a little bit more obsessive with our health. But it could be considered a disordered eating that usually happens when someone becomes obsessive with their food or with healthy eating in general, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, but I would say it's a newer eating disorder, but it is something that has, I would say, within the last 10 to 20 years, probably been more significant, just given the rise in wellness trends.
Yeah, and always just think about it simply as an obsession with quote clean eating.
Mm,
And we've seen the rise of this clean eating movement over the past 10, even 20 years, which in and of itself is problematic because clean eating implies that there is also dirty eating. And it puts this distinction between good foods, quote, good foods and bad foods when that can set someone up really for a feeling like a moral failure if they have this idea about what a good food is and what a bad food is when in reality food is just food And yes, there are more nourishing foods than other foods, but to label foods as good or bad can mean that when we have that judgment about it, when we eat those foods, we label ourselves as good or bad, or that we feel that we're not eating clean if we eat these foods that veer off of what we think is what we should be eating for optimal health, which is kind of
Exactly.
how this starts, right? It's this clean eating obsession is because we want to be healthy, but it can really spiral
Yeah.
and turn into a full-blown eating disorder. I don't think it's quite recognized by the DSM yet as an eating disorder, but it's certainly, yeah, I think, and I think you would agree, being in this profession, I see it, and we'll talk about this a little later, but I see it not just with my colleagues, but with people who have a like doctors and people who have a huge platform out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can cause some serious like mental health conditions later down the road when we're like focusing so much on the quality of everything or obsessing about these words that sometimes don't mean anything on a package, right? So things like what is it? The eggs, they are free range. Like that doesn't really have like a definition, right? But if we're so obsessed by just eating free range eggs or just eating pasture raised eggs, or only eating grass-fed meat, like things like that. I think that can really start to interfere not just with y your kind of like mental health, but also your social life too.
Oh, absolutely. And that eh, clean eating really, or this obsession with clean eating, becoming orthorexia, can start with really good intentions. So, the way that I find that it evolves with women I work with in my practice is they decide, or they're Googling and they have specific health conditions they want to address. So, they find information online and on social media about how cutting out certain food groups can help their health condition, help them resolve their health condition through diet. And there is a lot you can do to improve your health and improve any chronic health issues with diet, but diet isn't the only way that you can resolve certain health issues. But what happens is they see some improvement perhaps, and then that motivates them to continue this trend, and they get kind of deeper in the rabbit hole. But it starts off with the best of intentions, which is improving your health or improving a chronic health condition. And then it can become a little bit more serious when you start to eliminate these groups of foods, entire categories of foods, which we'll talk about, because you know what my biggest pet peeve is on social media is the carnivore movement, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, and I think you and I have both personally been here where we have either jumped around from being like being on specific diets or labeling us as, only eating certain ways. But I know for myself personally, I really, really struggled with this. Like, especially when I first got into like the wellness, nutrition, health world, I was like so dedicated to it, almost to a point where it was unhealthy, and I stopped eating out. I stopped going to dinner parties. I stopped, like, really kind of doing anything outside of my house because I was so scared of eating something that would quote unquote harm me. And I don't looking back now, I see how damaging that was. But when I was in it, I just thought I was trying to be the healthiest version of myself
Oh yeah, or
without.
that you had willpower, or that you were
Yes.
you were morally superior in a way. Well, you didn't
Yeah.
feel that way probably, but there's a lot of moral superiority about, I'm not going to a restaurant that uses vegetable oils because
Yes.
I avoid vegetable oils since they're bad for you. And again, with this labeling food as good or bad and having it affect your social life like you mentioned.
No, and I think this moral superiority that you mentioned actually subconsciously, I really do think I felt like that. Like I hate to admit that now because that is so not me. But back then, I do think that was the case for sure. Like I was like, oh, well, I don't eat that. Why do you eat that? Like I must be
Yeah.
better than you. And it really sucks to think that that was something that went through my head.
Oh yeah, and some of the other symptoms too, aside from just the or social isolation aspect, are just this anxiety around food choices and finding that you're thinking about food all day long. What are you going to eat? What are you not going to eat? And scrutinizing every food that you're eating, stressing about your food choices. having this basically take over your life. And I've been there too. A little bit about my story also is even in my teens, becoming a vegetarian and having that not turn out very well. I became severely anemic because I didn't design my vegetarian diet properly. But after that, and kind of the progression of it was cutting out certain food groups, starting with gluten and then dairy and then soy, and having my colleagues kind of rallying around and championing this because they're at that time 20 years ago, 15 years ago, gluten was the new poison in our food supply, and everybody avoided gluten. Everybody has to avoid gluten because there was just so much misinformation about it. But eventually
Yeah.
you're down to, I worked with women who are down to maybe 4 or 5 foods
Yeah.
because they've excluded so many foods from their diet. And really, I think I wrote an Instagram post on this. You can literally take any food out there and find false information about it, about why you should avoid it, or uh, information that actually does pertain to some people, but not the entire population. And so a lot of these social media wellness influencers are taking specific foods that may not work well in one body. Like an example is oxalates or oxalic acid that's present in spinach. Like people who have kidney stones or interstitial cystitis may need to avoid those foods, but they're saying those foods cause that in every human. And that's just shoddy science. So
Yeah.
you can literally take every single food that may not work for one person and apply that to the general population. And that's part of what's driving this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So well said. The other one that came to mind was phytates. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah,
Phytates
phytic acid.
was such a big thing in, like, I remember the paleo world.
Oh
Oh my god,
gosh.
it drove me crazy, and they would literally, like, shoot those foods down, and again, eliminating whole food groups, and it's just crazy to me that, I actually followed that advice for a
Oh,
while.
yeah. Because the science they use to back it up makes sense. It's phytic acid and other quote anti-nutrients in plant foods exist because plants don't want to be eaten by animals. So their theory and the biohackers that I follow now just to see what they're saying, their information is that you should not eat the majority of plant foods because these anti-nutrients in them cause inflammation and want to kill you. But that's again, that's based on very shoddy science because a lot of these anti-nutrients, yes, exist in these plants, but they exist in very small quantities. A lot of them are deactivated by cooking. And for that matter, some of them actually stimulate your immune system and create antioxidant effect in the body. So they actually make you healthier. And it's called hormesis. It's called
Mm,
that's the whole concept of if you're giving your body a very slight stressor, it actually makes you stronger. And so that these anti-nutrients have this hormetic effect. And so does exercise is a perfect example of
yeah,
hormesis.
exactly.
You're putting your body through a slight stress and it's actually making it stronger. So that rant is just to say that it is scaring people away from eating foods that are completely fine and actually very beneficial for them by applying this shoddy science or even guidelines that may only be applicable if you have like a specific condition.
Yeah, definitely. I will say too, Mary, I know you and I both have histories of eating disorders. And I just want to throw it out there that it's very possible that people who already have past eating disorders could be prone, especially if they are trying to eat healthier and nourish themselves, could be more prone to orthorexia, just given that they have been triggered in the past already, by this obsession of that kind of surrounds themselves with food.
Yeah. And that's a really good, I think it could go either way. I think that people who have a past history, kind of like what you were saying, who already may have disordered eating patterns, and then people who maybe start with this clean eating movement and then that can move them into disordered eating patterns. So yeah, I was trying to think of a cliche. It's not six of one, half dozen of the other, is it? Anyway, but yes. Fun fact about me is that for some reason my brain doesn't comprehend cliches. And so I use them inappropriately pretty frequently, which can be funny, but also sort of embarrassing. So anyway, that's just an aside. But there's some way to describe that it's not the boomerang effect. I don't know. Anyway, yes, that disordered eating patterns can lead you to orthorexia and vice versa. Maybe that's what I
Yeah.
was looking for, vice versa.
Yeah, yeah, and then vice versa. Wow, that was a long
Glad we
way, long
we
road to take.
really workshopped the shit out of that one. um, but one, so we were talking about social media, and I really want to call this out on this episode specifically because so many young people, especially so many people in general, are getting their information, their health and wellness information from people who have zero training on TikTok and on Instagram, especially. And that's what it can be fueling a lot of these really disordered eating behaviors is following this wellness influencer who says that she or he has cut out all of these foods and is healthier than ever. So somebody else tries this and it can actually cause a lot of deficiencies. And aside from the mental implications, a lot of physical problems can arise. And we were talking about this earlier, is, I see a lot of doctors and a lot of our colleagues, our practitioners who are kind of promoting these really strict, quote, clean eating guidelines and standards and this completely toxin free lifestyle that is just kind of not attainable for the majority of the population because it's so expensive.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, especially these health foods that you find only at, these small grocery stores that are not even all over the country. I know like living in LA, I'm sure everyone has heard of Erewhon, and if you haven't, just Google it or find it on Instagram because there's some hilarious videos
Oh,
of it.
the reels that they've created making fun of Erewhon are
It's
gold.
unreal, and as much as I hate that store, I also love that store because they do have really damn good food, but the prices are just oh, they're just ridiculous. I mean, I don't even know what other way to say it, like, it's laughable, and that's why people make fun of it because it literally is laughable,
Mm.
but yes, it's an example of that, like, those kind of foods that they're promoting that they sell at these grocery stores, the majority of the people, A, don't shop there, B, can't afford it, and C, it's not accessible throughout the country. And yet these influencers, like you were saying, Mary, are touting it to be the only way get whatever health goal or look like them or whatever it is. And it's just really sad to see. And honestly, I don't know if it's gonna stop, unless people like understand that that's just that's just I don't know, it's just an influencer,
Yeah,
I'm not sure how
yeah.
to get through it.
And on the flip side of this, I want to mention that some of our colleagues who used to really promote these very restrictive eating guidelines and standards for specific conditions have now gone to the other side and said, you know what, a lot of this information that we were speaking about years and years ago, we've now got updated studies on some of these foods, like vegetable oils are a big
Mm,
one that we'll talk about. But with food prices the way they are, people, it used to be that we would say, oh, if you can't find organic meat, opt out. If you can't find wild fish, opt out. Well, now we know that this meat still has nutrients that are completely in line with what you need for daily protein needs and minerals and B vitamins and whatever else. So-
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it really is. Like, I always get the question, like, "Is meat bad for you?" And I feel bad that that's even a question because it's a form of food that has been around since our existence.
yeah,
And I don't wanna say, like I don't wanna obviously ignore the fact that we've evolved and our digestive systems have evolved, and obviously we have chronic disease now, and, food contributes to all of that, of course, and there's food I think that, one person can handle better than the other, but that's
exactly.
all, that's a big another topic, shall I say,
Yeah,
just in terms of understanding, like, the root cause and why someone can't digest something a certain way or why it makes them feel a certain way. It's not necessarily the food. It could be how your body is processing it. It could be a lack of something that you're missing, and that's when you wanna turn and work with a healthcare professional
yeah,
and
yeah.
not go to an influencer.
No, and you're right. And these factors depend on your genome, so your collection of genetics, your collection of genes in your body, and so many other factors as well. And speaking of meat and social media, I think my favorite sort of orthorexic trend, if I can even say that because it's not my favorite. It's one of the most disturbing ones to me is probably the carnivore diet. And this really gained popularity from social media, from people saying it cured them of their chronic autoimmune conditions and cured them of their disease. And so I want to be clear here that the carnivore diet excludes everything except for animal products. So meat, eggs, sometimes dairy, but they exclude all vegetables, fruits, carbohydrates, everything except for animal products, right? So I want to be clear that actually doing a 1 or 2 month carnivore diet can be really beneficial for people who have irritable bowel disease or having a flare up, for instance. So there are therapeutic uses for something like this, but people who are doing this diet long term and who have become pretty obsessive about it, and there are a number of social media influencers out there that I don't necessarily want to name, um, but their information has caused a lot of people to say, well, if it worked for this person, it could work for me and help resolve my chronic issues. And a lot of people try this diet and it can be really detrimental long term. It can cause a lot of inflammation. Not everybody can, again, that goes back to your genome. Some people don't have the ability to process saturated fats or that much protein, and it can cause a lot of pretty serious health issues long term if you don't monitor your blood work and make sure that it's working for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think the takeaway message here is really, when you are looking for the diet that best works for you, really look at yourself. I would say first work with a health professional. Like it is the easiest route you can take. Otherwise, you are going to be lost in this social media world. You're going to be lost in the Google world. And at least from my experience, it's more time, more money, not getting results,
Yeah.
that you're looking for. And so I always say like yes, you can talk to your doctor, but doctors don't have a lot of nutrition training. So if it's specific to food, like obviously I'm a registered dietitian, they can take insurance, but there's other options out there as well. But yeah, that's the best start. Or follow people that have been trained and are credible in what they're talking about, and I think that would also be us, Mary.
Yeah, and I love that you said that actually because there are so many the and especially women. I should qualify. We didn't specify. Obviously, women are more susceptible to orthorexia,
Mm,
but there are so many women out there following people on social media, scrolling through Instagram and saying, "Okay, this speaks to me. I'm going to try this diet." But as you mentioned, Carla, it's super important if you have chronic health conditions that you want to resolve by improving your diet in part, or you're interested in just finding out what your ideal diet is for you. Everybody's so different. Then exactly seek health professionals help so that you're not listening to social media wellness influencers who are just giving broad guidelines that aren't tailored
yeah.
to a specific person.
Absolutely, because the trends that I'm seeing right now are horrific. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
where they're coming from, I don't know how they're being made up, but it is scary, some of the advice that's being given out there,
And
so
it's
please beware.
dangerous. There are
Yeah,
yeah, I almost on a weekly basis read articles about people who have taken advice and done some crazy diet hack and it's landed them
yeah,
in the hospital.
yeah,
So yeah, really important to not go it alone.
yeah. I have a question for you, Mary.
Mhm.
What is the craziest thing you've ever done in terms of your diet?
I used to do like 5-day juice fasts in
Mhm.
my 20s. And at the time, I was thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna save money. I'm gonna be glowing from the inside out." And you do a pre-fast where you only eat steamed vegetables for 2 days to get ready, and then you do the juice fast for 5 days, and you do green juices, fruit juices, all these different juices all day long. And so by the end of these juice fasts, I would think that I was cleansing my body and that I'd be rejuvenated. But instead, after one juice fast, and then you have to break the fast properly, I was, like, horribly constipated for, like, a week. It really
Yeah,
screwed a lot of things up, and these juice fasts also they juices inherently have a lot of sugar in them, and so if
yeah,
you're consuming a lot of juice and I was trying to do mostly green vegetables, which are less sugar and not a lot of fruit, but if you're consuming fruits without their fiber, then you're getting a big sugar hit. So it's not always great for people who have blood sugar regulation issues.
Yeah.
And then, so what happens is you start off the first few days and you think you're going through this quote detox reaction because you feel so terrible. But really, it's probably because, yeah, you're just drinking a bunch of juice all day long and that's not really right for everybody.
Really,
Yeah.
it's because you're not nourishing yourself.
Yeah.
Uh,
What about
yeah.
you?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I did so many juice fasts back in the day too. And
Oh, yeah.
the only reason I'm thankful for one of those juice fasts, and I actually did it for a month. I can't even
Oh my
believe I did
God, you
that.
drink only juice for a month?
I know. The only good thing that came out of that is
Wow.
that's actually how I found out that I was gluten intolerant, because when I started to then
Reintroduce. Yeah.
reintroduce foods, I remember the one thing, like waking up in the morning and I was so excited to finally eat food again. And I made waffles. Like I had no idea how to reintroduce foods clearly. And I chose to make waffles. And they were definitely like whole wheat waffles, things I had eaten prior to that with no problem. Within 20 minutes, I looked pregnant.
Oh, bloating.
My
Yeah.
yeah, my stomach and it was I thought it was just, the fact that I was just eating again. I was like, "Oh,
Right.
well, this is gonna take some time." And, so I went back to, like, basics, like some maybe, like, broth or, like, steamed veggies and then I would start to introduce my normal foods, and sure enough, it just kept I kept getting the same symptoms.
Mm.
And so that's when I realized, I was like, "Shit, I think I'm one of those gluten-free people."
Wait, back up. You really only drank juice for a month? You
Yeah.
cannot be serious. It was not a month.
Oh, no, it was a month. It was like I think it was okay, I think it was 21 days, let's be clear. I think it was a 21-day, like, juice fast.
Ah.
So yeah, I did all the juicing at home and I bought a juicer. I was like all in. And yeah, and that's what happened. That wasn't even my craziest though. My craziest was in college and I did the master cleanse. Do you
Oh,
remember
yeah.
that?
I was gonna mention that actually.
So for people who don't know, the master cleanse is a mix of lemon juice, maple syrup.
Cayenne
Actually I think that's
pepper.
it. Oh yeah, and cayenne pepper. Thank you. Of
And
course.
I think isn't there a cinnamon stick in there or something?
Optional. I think it's optional. But yes, it was those 3 ingredients, and, honestly, it's actually pretty damn good,
Yeah.
but tried drinking that for 7 days straight.
Oh my God. That has literally landed people in the hospital.
Um, okay, so this is where I was going with that. So, I did it only for 7 days. I was supposed to do it for, like, 2 weeks. I did it I think, like, on my 5th day, I started to get really crazy cramping,
Oh
and I
God. Yeah,
didn't
because no
yeah.
minerals.
Exactly. It was a lack of electrolytes, lack of minerals, even though they say maple syrup has all the minerals you
Yeah.
need.
It's like a teaspoon or something.
Yes. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, but I was in college at the time. I was studying. I was going to classes. I was trying to focus. That was not happening that week. Anyway, so by the end of the week, I actually had such bad cramps that my boyfriend at the time had to rush me to the ER.
Oh my
And
I know.
that's
I've heard that so many times. I'm so sorry.
yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
learned a big, big lesson, but, at the time, I was excited because I lost 8 pounds.
Well, I was gonna say, all these stories about extreme diets, and it really, for me, it started as an obsession with wanting to be thin, and the
Always.
the quote cleansing aspect was a great side effect. But cleansing would make you thin because if your liver is detoxed, you're burning fat more effectively. So I wish I could say I was wanting to do it specifically for health reasons, but really it was I wanted to lose weight, and this
Yeah.
was a fast way to do it by not eating.
I mean, I feel like that still is the story, that's
Yeah.
why we're motivated, and I don't wanna just say women, I think it's all people. I
Mm.
think women have more societal pressure on them to stay a certain way or look a certain way, but yeah, it's I don't know if that'll ever go away, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. There is the societal double standard that's why women are so much more likely to have eating disorders.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, anything else you wanna mention on that, Mary?
No, I think I just wanted people to kind of be aware about this topic and understand the symptoms because it's easy to confuse your very healthy lifestyle with something that's bordering on distressing to your mental health. So, there are both health professionals and therapists out there that can help
Oh,
navigate you through this. My therapist in my 20s and 30s was instrumental in helping reverse my poor self-esteem and my body image issues. So, uh,
mm.
yeah, I would recommend considering both if you suspect that this might be you.
Oh my gosh. I just got chills as you said that because, you know, when I was in private practice as a dietitian, I did not realize that you weren't just going to be consulting people on food.
Oh my God,
It's
right?
so much more than that. You don't realize that you're going into a profession also as a therapist.
I
And
100%.
and there are so many things that come up. It's definitely not just food. There's a reason why people have unhealthy relationships with food, and it is not food related. It always goes back to their childhood or their past or their
Totally.
upbringing, and you're not prepared for that. Like, that was a huge, learning experience for me and working with people and knowing how to manage that, but my god, just coming out of college and just wanting to, like, teach people,
Teach
like, the
people about
basics,
yeah.
how to eat.
Yeah, I
Little
really
did
yeah,
I know.
I totally agree with that. I am glad you said that actually because I think about that to this day that my job sometimes borders on being a therapist, which I'm actually not licensed to be one, and I
Mhm.
refer out to therapists frequently, but I think to myself, if I hadn't had 25 years of therapy, I may not be able to recognize, hey, I need to steer this person into a mental health professional, or
Right.
even just being able to use language that makes people feel non judgmental about food and their choices because food is so intimately tied to emotions, exactly
Yeah.
like you described.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely.
Before we wrap up, is there any little tidbit you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Oh man, I think you wrapped it up pretty well just in terms of what we talked about today. Like, if you feel like you're struggling, like we mentioned, please go see a healthcare professional. Like Mary had mentioned, whether that's someone that understands nutrition or that's someone who's in the mental health world. So, if you have any questions for us regarding anything we discussed today, please leave it in the comments. Get a hold of us either through our socials or website, and we'll see each other soon, Mary.
See you, Carla.